Well, hello everybody. I'm seeing lots of you trickle in. I'm going to give it a few more moments before we get started. But thank you so much for joining us tonight, you early birds who are perfectly on time. Hello everyone, just joining. We'll get started in a few moments. I'm still seeing the numbers rising as you all enter. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Okay, we'll give it 10 more seconds and I won't do the countdown and then we'll get started. All right. Well, hi everyone. I'm Belinda Southgate. I'm the CollegeWise Partnerships Marketing Director, and I'm here to welcome you to this evening's partner webinar, Craze, Your Path to Computer Science Success. So, of course, all of you have come to us tonight because you are involved with one of our favourite partners, the Coder School. And we are thrilled to have teamed up with Hansel and the Coder School again tonight to be able to provide you with a whole load of helpful information to help you navigate college admissions as it applies to STEM and computer science. So as well as hearing from Hansel, the founder of the Coder School, you will also be hearing from Meredith Graham, who has over 20 years in the admissions space as an admissions officer and then as a college counsellor. I won't say any more about her now because she'll introduce herself in a little bit, but you are in very, very expert hands tonight. So while we wait for a few more people to jump in, I'm still seeing the numbers going up here. I'm going to launch a quick poll. And the aim of this poll really is just for us to be able to find out who we have joining us tonight. And that will help Hansel and Meredith to be able to tailor what they're saying a little bit more to you, especially as we get towards the Q&A at the end. We'll want to try and make sure we're covering topics that be relevant for you. So just give me 1 second whilst I launch our poll. All right. So the question is, who is joining us today? Are you a parent or guardian? A high school student? Okay. Looks like we have a really nice mix of high school students and parents and guardians. And some of you that have joined together, that's nice. And looks like we've mostly got 11th graders, 10th graders. Ooh, lots of 9th graders here as well. Okay. Really, really helpful. I'll just leave that going for a few more seconds. All right. Thank you so much for that. So now I just want to quickly tell you a little bit about CollegeWise. I know some of you may have joined a previous CollegeWise webinar that we've hosted with the Coder School, but for those of you that have never heard of us before, I just wanted to make sure that you had a little bit of context before we dive in. So really, CollegeWise is the leading expert when it comes to college admissions counselling nationwide. We were founded in 1999, and then since then we've helped over 30,000 students to gain admission to really great schools across the nation and internationally. We started out, as many companies do, with our founder, Kevin, over the kitchen table working one-to-one with students. And now we've grown to more than 85 expert counsellors with more than 500 years of combined experience in guiding students through the choices they face in high school. So today, as I said, we are considered one of the nation's most trusted providers of college admissions guidance. And we work one-to-one with students to steer them through the entire admissions journey. So that really includes everything from selecting the right classes, picking a major, deciding a testing strategy, exploring summer options, curating school lists, crafting compelling essays, you name it, anything under that college admissions applications umbrella, we do that at CollegeWise. So if you are at the start of your journey, maybe in 8th or 9th grade, we do start right from that age at CollegeWise. And then, of course, we work right the way through senior year to make sure that students can send across an application that they're really, really proud of. Okay, that's enough about CollegeWise. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping for you. So we will be sharing a recording with you in an email that will go out tomorrow, so do not worry about that. You don't need to take notes. As I said, we will also be having a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for our speakers, you can pop those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and then we will try and get through as many as possible when we get to the end. The more broad the question, the more likely we are to be able to answer it, because we, of course, we want to make sure we're asking things that will be relevant to a lot of people. But if you do have a specific question, feel free to pop that in there as well, and we will try and get to it if we can. All righty. Well, I think that's everything from me for now. I will pop back in towards the end just to give you some more information about how you can connect with CollegeWise if you are interested in speaking with one of our counsellors. But for now, I'll hand it over to our wonderful presenters to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Belinda. I'm introducing myself first. My name is Meredith Graham, and I am a master counselor with CollegeWise. I joined CollegeWise in the summer of 2013, so this is my 11th year with CollegeWise, and before that I had about 15 years on the college side. So that is, I'm in my 26th year of working with college counseling and college admissions in various capacities. The vast majority of my time has been working with students in STEM in general, and some of that has been specific to computer science, I promise. But I've been having these conversations for a very long time, trying to talk with students and families about how to sort of find their best fit path within STEM and within computer science, especially as that has become such a hot area the last few years in particular. I have lots more to sort of say about this, lots more thoughts, but I'm going to pass it over to Hansel to introduce himself now, and then we'll be back.
All right. Hey, folks. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So I'm the founder and CEO of the Coder School. I know very little about college admissions. That's why we have Meredith here. I'm all about coding education. I teach kids how to code, and that's what we do at the Coder School. My background, I have a CS degree from Washington, St. Louis. I'm also a happy client of CollegeWise as well. That's why I ended up, part of the reason I ended up partnering with that. My son just got accepted into WashU, so super excited about that. So I'll pass it back to you there, Meredith.
All right, that sounds great. So the focus of tonight is computer science and sort of figuring out how to find your way into a computer science program as a high school student. What kinds of preparation do you need? What sorts of things do you need to be thinking about now to sort of optimize your chances as you get there? And really the first fundamental question around that is around whether or not computer science is the right major for you. And we're going to spend a lot of time on all of this stuff tonight. For those of you who were able to join our other webinar where we talk more broadly about STEM, the first couple of slides that I'm going to be sharing are either replicated from that or are sort of reminding you of that are a little bit more specific about computer science. We wanted to make sure to set the stage for anyone who wasn't able to be here for those other ones. But I promise you, even if this is sort of a return visit for you, there's still going to be plenty of new stuff in here for you that is very much computer science specific. So, and you know, the first question we really want to tackle is talking about computer science admissions rates. One of the things that has been increasingly challenging over the last few years is because computer science, STEM in general, but computer science in particular, is such the hot topic. It's such the hot area. It is becoming increasingly challenging to get admitted. When you're applying to college, there are a lot of colleges that admit direct to major. Not everyone, but a lot of colleges admit direct to major. And basically what that means is when you are applying to the university, you are specifically saying, I want to attend your university and major in this one field. So you're not being admitted just to the university in general with a chance to sort of explore different areas and then find your way into your major of choice. You are specifically saying from the outset, I want that major, and you are being considered and evaluated among all of the other students who are applying just for that major. Now, that is relevant for the information you see here on the slides. The information that's here, most of this is data from this from last year. We're just getting the information from this year as well, so we don't have quite as complete a data set yet from the students who are just heading off to college next year, basically Hansel's son's year. We're still getting that information at this point. But I don't expect it to be radically different than this. But part of what we're trying to show you here is that the information that you see on a college's website about the admit rate doesn't always reflect the specific competitiveness or admissions um, niche of computer science. And you can see some pretty terrifying numbers on the screen here. University of Washington for out-of-state students, it's 2% admit rate. Now, if you happen to be a Washington State resident and apply to the University of Washington for computer science, you've got about a 24% admit rate for students from the state of Washington. But if you are out of state or international, it's a 2% admit rate to UW for computer science majors. And that is very different from that overall 46% admit rate. So we spend a lot of time at CollegeWise talking with our students about how to pick the best major, the right major for you, to try to sort of, figure out, is it worth it for you to try to apply to some of these majors directly? And by the way, the information that's on here, this slide is taken directly from a blog post that Hansel has on the Coder School website. The URL's down there in the bottom, and I think Belinda was going to try and put it in the chat. I don't have the chat open, so I can't see whether or not she did, but hopefully she gets a chance to do that. So again, choosing this right off the bat is is a pretty important decision, because sometimes you can't transfer into one of the computer science majors on a campus either. Now, again, for folks who were on our last webinar, you saw this slide already, but again, it's worth revisiting for folks who are just joining us today. So computer science, within sort of the realm of STEM and beyond STEM, computer science is kind of its own thing. It both is its own specific discipline, and then it also sort of works as and exists in service to other areas. What I mean by that is, if you are looking at trying to see how a disease vector moves, so how is a particular disease transmitted through mosquito-borne population, for example, you would need computer science to model that, but that's sort of in service to the biology and sort of the more medical, the disease related question, as opposed to it being a specific computer science for the sake of computer science. So that's not so much software design. So when you're thinking about this, one of the big picture questions when it comes to computer science is actually, are you thinking about hardware or software? Different colleges have it listed differently. At the vast majority of colleges, if you're looking at a computer science major, it's going to be software focused. Now, there are some places that have combined majors where it's both software and hardware. And it's not that college is going to ignore the hardware focus. They're not going to ignore hardware completely. I'm sorry, when you're doing software development, they're not going to completely just sort of pretend that the hardware is irrelevant. But most of the time, a program is going to be set up to either focus on the software side of things or on the hardware side of things. So when you're looking at colleges, you want to make sure that you're choosing the correct version for your interest. Again, if you're interested in the coding element of it, that's more often going to be computer science as opposed to computer engineering. One other question, issue, conversation that comes up a lot of times is around Bachelor of Arts versus Bachelor of Science. And this may sort of be new for some folks on the call here or on the webinar here. Computer science at some colleges lives in an engineering program. At some colleges, it lives in an arts and sciences program. At some places, at some colleges, it lives completely on its own in its own independent unit. There are some colleges where it exists in both a College of Engineering and a College of Arts and Sciences. Both Cornell and the University of Michigan have computer science as a major in both areas. And the big difference between it is, are you earning a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science? So the information on this slide is actually taken from the University of Colorado Boulder's website. And I wanted to share this because they do a really great job of sort of explaining what the similarities and differences are at most places between a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science. There's sort of this pervasive fear with students and families that studying computer science as a Bachelor of Arts will make you unmarketable or unemployable somehow, or that you won't get into grad school. And none of those are true. By and large, the Bachelor of Arts and the Bachelor of Science have very similar career and grad school opportunities at the other side. It's just a question of, are you studying computer science through the lens of more of a scientist and an engineer? So you're going to be taking more science classes, more higher level math classes. Are you going to be taking more physics, more chemistry? Or are you going to be taking it more from a liberal arts perspective? Are you going to be taking more sort of humanities, social science, more English, foreign language, philosophy kinds of classes? Different students have different interests. Different colleges have it set up differently. But this is one of the questions you want to be thinking about as you're looking at colleges. And by the way, one other thing to keep in mind here, a lot of times students think, well, I can't go to a liberal arts college and study computer science because it's a liberal arts college. It doesn't have what I need. And that's also untrue. Liberal arts colleges have, in many cases, fantastic computer science programs. In fact, the first center for AI at a college level in the US is at Colby College, which is a little liberal arts college in Maine. So if you're interested in AI, that's a fantastic option. It's only about 1,700 students, super competitive to get in there as well to the university. And it's a Bachelor of Arts. Are you marketable? Absolutely. Can you get a job? Absolutely. Can you go to grad school? Absolutely. It's all about making the most of the opportunities and experiences you have on that campus once you're there. All right. So now we're headed into the newer-ish stuff. So what sort of preparation do you need in high school in order to be competitive for computer science majors? Well, you do need to be focusing on taking a most demanding math and science curriculum at your high school. Please, as much as you can, stay with the calculus stream as long as possible at your high school. One of the interesting shifts over the last 3 to 5 years is that calculus coursework in high school is no longer explicitly or specifically required at most colleges for computer science study. It is still explicitly required at a couple of places, but at most places it is no longer a prerequisite for admission. However, particularly at these kinds of places that we're looking at that early slide with all the really competitive numbers on there, taking calculus in high school is still sort of a subconscious or an unconscious signal to an admissions officer that you have taken a rigorous curriculum. Whether or not it's a specific requirement, it's oftentimes sort of used as sort of like a behind the scenes sort of oh, the students really challenged themselves. They've taken calculus in high school rather than getting through pre-calculus and then stopping in math or taking stats in your senior year instead. As a computer scientist, you're going to need the calculus a lot of times. And Hansel and I had a really interesting conversation about stats as we were preparing for this. And I'll let him chime in on that here in a minute. But the other question that comes up on here is, okay, so great. We've got math and we've got science listed, and then we've got electives, we've got social science. Where does computer science fit in on this? Well, that's going to depend a little bit on your high school, which is what we're going to talk about in the next slide. But I want Hansel to chime in here a little bit on sort of the parent perspective on this particular curriculum here.
Throwing me on the spot here. So I think the thing as a parent is I know my kids are gonna take CS because at my high school that's what they offer, and if they want to do CS, that's what they're gonna do. And I think if the question is whether you are going to take calculus or CS or stats, I think are all the AP classes that you were talking about. For me, the APCS is the obvious one, right? Because that's what they offer. Now, I think what we were talking about is whether the AP calculus is something that the CS folks in their real jobs actually use. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
So if that's what you wanted me to chime on. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, being in the CS field myself, I realized that there's a lot of rigor in what we were taught early on, both in high school and college. And the truth is that that rigor is meant to test how good you are at learning these things. I mean, have I ever used the advanced calculus, that I learned in high school or in college, since? No, not one day. But what it showed the people that I applied to, when I applied to school, what I showed them is, hey, but I can do it. I have the rigor to do it. And so if I have the rigor to do that, then I also have the rigor to learn these other new things that are coming down the pipe, like all the time, AI, crypto, whatever, these new things. So it kind of shows that you're able to pick up these new things, and that's why it's still important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's where the other thing where things get a little bit tricky is, how does your school consider computer science? Now, one of the interesting things about my role as a college counselor, and we talk about this at CollegeWise among the counselors, is what are the different curricular opportunities that are available at different high schools and different communities at different schools in different parts of the country. And schools do some really different things. If you've been at the same high school all 4 years, if you've been in the same district your entire life, you may not necessarily be aware of how differently things can be done in other places. Computer science is one of those sort of potentially oddball cases. You remember when I was talking earlier and I sort of said computer science is kind of its own thing. It's both its own area of study, but also can be used in service to other things, other areas. It's kind of reflected in this as well. There are some schools that consider computer science to be a math class. There are some schools that consider computer science to be a science class. There are some schools that consider computer science to be a language class. And there are some schools that consider it to be a career and tech education class. So you might have a school where your choice is AP Computer Science or AP Calculus, and they would fulfill the same requirement. You might have another school where it could be AP Physics or AP Computer Science, and it would fulfill the same requirement. You might have a school where you could take AP Computer Science or AP Spanish, and it would fulfill the same requirement. And then there are other schools where taking AP Computer Science would be viewed similar to taking a human nutrition class or an accounting class, because it's considered to be purely an elective. Now, you don't have any control over how your school decides what category of class the computer science classes are in. You just sort of have to figure out, okay, given what the situation is, and by the way, colleges in admissions, they learn these things from your school because your school will send something that's called a high school profile, which basically outlines what the courses and opportunities are at your school. And it will typically say, here are our AP classes, here are our science classes, here are our math classes. And so if I look at a list of math classes and I see that AP Computer Science is listed with the math classes right next to calculus, then I know that's how your school considers it. And if I ever have a question about that as an admissions officer, I call your high school or I email your school counselor and say, hey, I'm just trying to make sense out of this. Can you help me with this? And they're always very, very helpful in return. I mean, they're very busy, but they're very helpful in return to answer that question. So if you're wondering, like, wait, how will a school know? Like, if it's career and tech ed at my school, but somebody else has it as a math class, how will colleges know? That's how they know. Your high school, there's a mechanism to let colleges know, just to sort of reassure you about that one. But within whatever the context of your school is, how do you prioritize getting that computer science coursework, within the context of what's available, the number of, potential courses you have, depending on how your school does scheduling and things like that. The number one priority, of course, is you still have to make sure you hit your graduation requirements. If you can't fit computer science in during your school day and still hit your graduation requirements, then you got to get a little bit creative. You have to figure out a different way to get those computer science courses, to get that computer science experience. And that's when we want to start looking at outside of school options. Are there, community college classes? Are there summer courses? Are there, is Coursera, is studying it on your own an option for you? And one of the other questions is also, do you know how you want to use the CS in your life? Again, that kind of goes back to sort of that early statement I made about it's its own thing. And it's also, used in service to other areas. So if you're interested in natural language processing and you're interested in, how language is acquired, maybe you're interested still in taking a bunch of foreign language classes that will open up linguistics coursework in college in addition to computer science coursework. That is a thing. And so that could be, an option for you. Or maybe you're just excited about coding. You're just excited about picking up as many coding languages as you can. That's also a thing. And so you sort of want to think about how do you fit this in with your coursework or with your extracurricular and experiential preparation outside of class. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hansel to talk a little bit about outside of school preparation.
Thanks, Meredith. Yeah, I'm glad you didn't ask me that last question about how I want to use CS, because 30 years later, I still have no idea how I want to use CS. All right, so let's talk about experiential prep. So outside of all these classes, that Meredith was talking about, what else can you do? There's a bunch of extracurricular things you can do. This is not at all an exhaustive list, but just some samples that we thought of. Put them into separate categories, but I'll start with the coding competitions one. Just Google around, you'll see that there's all kinds of competitions out there. USACO is just super technical, but it's for individuals, ACSL, maybe for teams. But I did want to highlight real quick the Congressional App Challenge. It's probably, for me, what I see of it is it's the best sort of winnability to prestige ratio. It is a coding contest run by the U.S. House of Representatives. And kids out there, it's not like you're not battling against like 100,000 other kids. It is district by district. Every district has a winner. Some districts, if you're in a lucky district, you might have 100 entries. If you're really lucky, you might have 10 entries in that district. So you might only be battling against 10 other people, 10 other coders, right? And the winners that I've seen, a lot of these aren't super high tech stuff. A lot of these are just, it's a good subject matter. It talks about climate change, talks about how the government works, whatever, things like that. So pretty basic stuff that get wins. And if you win, you get invited to go to the US Capitol in Washington, D.C., where you can show your app to actual US Congress people. One of our winners back in San Francisco, actually, there's a picture of them with Nancy Pelosi. I mean, whatever side of the political aisle you're on, if you get a picture of somebody that famous, the admin officers are going to be impressed by that. So Congressional App Challenge, look that up. Teach others to code. You can come to our schools. We can help you guys. You can intern for us. We can actually pay you guys if you are an exceptional teacher. We can pay you guys as well. That of course shows your passion for coding if you're able to, choose somebody else to code. Online courses, again, Google that. There are tons of them. Meredith mentioned it briefly about Coursera and some of these other things. MIT, for those that you don't know, they actually have this thing called Open Coursework. Which is their actual undergrad and grad curriculum online. In fact, I was talking to this kid who's a junior at MIT right now. I was like, hey, can you give me some tips on how to get my kid into MIT? And what he said was that what he did is that he took as many of those undergrad courses as he could. Now, is that what got him into MIT? I don't know, but certainly that was one of his many things that helped him get in. Let's see, going to the bottom left here, the app diary and portfolio. So I recommend all of you guys, especially the younger folks, 8th, 9th grade folks who are just starting to tinker around with computer science now. Start this thing that I'm calling a portfolio, kind of a diary kind of deal. It's not necessarily something that you'll necessarily share with your admission officer or anything like that, but it's really for yourself, right? It's just for yourself to see what journey you went through. And each time you make an app, however big or small, just kind of put it away in there and put a little note by it. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Why? How long did it take you to make it? Those kind of things. Because what you can do in a few years is you can look back at your diary and say, hey, this is the kind of the journey that I went through. Maybe that becomes an essay for your college applications. Who knows? But it kind of shows you what you went through and helps remind you, kind of what you thought at that time. Hackathons are a great way to code fast. As you guys know, it's not about coding right at a hackathon. It's just you're getting in with the team and you're just throwing down as much code as you can. It can be a lot of fun. If you guys have done hackathons a few times, I would say start one. If you can actually start a hackathon, that comes with fundraising, comes with finding judges, comes with, marketing, all kinds of other stuff. Super impressive to an admissions officer. And then the final category I have here is starting a channel or a blog. If you could start a YouTube channel, if you can start a TikTok channel and actually get followers, get actual people to follow you, what it shows me is that you're really passionate about that. Because I know it's hard to get followers. In order to get followers, you got to post, 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 post. And in order to keep posting, you got to be passionate about it. So to me, if you can get something up there that, maybe it's about history of technology, what's a floppy disk, what's a mainframe, whatever is interesting to you, if you can get that channel going and show the mid officer that you're able to do this as your passion, it could tell a lot about your story. So these are just some of the things I came up with. I'll call them singles, I guess, and not home runs. But one thing I didn't mention is just building a project, passion project. You guys probably hear this all the time, building a passion project. I'd call a passion project maybe more of a double, maybe more of a triple, maybe not a home run, but certainly bigger than the other things from that other slide. And so the way I think about it, and I'll give you guys a quick tip though. So first of all, what is a passion project? So basically, it is something that you build that shows what you are interested in and kind of writes your story. Shows the admin officer this is the thing that I'm really passionate about, right? And it makes you stand out and be unique. And so I'll give you a quick tip: is if you guys were to have a interview, whether it's a college interview or a job interview, and they ask you the question of how do you solve a complex problem? The answer is you break it into smaller pieces. So use that tip. But I'm going to use that tip right here. Like any good coder, I'm going to use this tip in trying to answer this question. What interests you about computer science? This is how you pick your passion project. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of guidance to figure out how to pick your passion project. So because this a passion project can be anything, infinite wild world of anything, what I'm trying to do here is to break it into subcategories. So I threw out 4 categories. These are the ones that came to my mind. You guys might have different ones, but come up with some categories and see which ones you're most likely to gravitate towards. So for example, in this case, technology. Are you somebody who wants to learn coding for the sake of coding, CS for the sake of CS? You want to just throw down on the hardest, algorithms you can find. You want to find out how AI really works. You want to build your own cryptocurrency, that kind of stuff that may not be useful for anybody else, but it's useful for you just because you're going to learn a lot. Technology might be something that you want to dig into. Flip side of that is business. If you look at business, those things aren't typically technically that difficult. It's more like you build a website, you build a platform, something like that, something that though has enough interesting parts to it that somebody would pay you money for it. Right. So what that would tell you is that you might be a little bit more interested in a business / coding side of it, as opposed to just uniquely just coding by itself. Right. So then that might steer you towards a different way. Now, impact, it's similar to the business thing, except for instead of business, we're talking about influencing people. So maybe you want to tell folks about climate change. You want to tell folks about underprivileged. You want to help, folks in general. Maybe that's a website. Maybe that's something where you're able to get a lot of users and somehow influence them, maybe politically, whatever it is. And then the last one is community. Maybe you want to help your grandparents. Maybe you want to help the local church. Maybe you want to help the local food bank. Maybe your little brother, help your little brother feed the cat every week or something like that. I'll throw that into the community bucket. So things like that a little bit closer to you. And so the idea of breaking that bigger question into these 4 or other categories is once you have decided which category you gravitate towards, keep breaking it down. If you decide it's technology, okay, now next thing, decide, do you want to do AI? Do you want to do, data science? Do you want to do algorithms? What inside of technology do you want to do? And then just keep breaking it down. Right. So that is typically how you would code an application. And that's what I'm saying for you guys. That's how you could answer this question about what kind of passion project you want to do. So if we flip to the next slide, I'll actually get a little bit more, all the way granular this time. I won't go through this list, but these are, each of the categories that I came up with in that previous slide, 3 examples of each. I believe that these should each be doable by a high schooler and also at the level that's, sort of big and serious enough to where you could consider it a passion project, depending on how you do it. Of course, this list is not meant for you to come in here and say, okay, I'm going to do number 3. It's meant for to give you inspiration. You need to do what's right for you, what you're passionate about, what you really want to do, not what somebody else tells you to do. That's I think the most important thing. All right, how's that, Meredith? Did I fly through those slides fast enough? Are we able to jump into this last slide here?
More than fast enough. We have plenty of time to have this conversation. So,
right.
Yeah. So as we were preparing this presentation, Hansel and I, we've met a couple of times over the last few months, talking both for the STEM presentation, but also for this one. And we've had a chance to talk about a lot of sort of pragmatic things, but also some like more sort of philosophical kinds of elements of computer science and admissions and sort of the intersection of the actual coding and sort of what it's, the skill set necessary to be a coder and the job market, and as well as sort of the college admissions side of things. And so we came up with sort of these 3 final questions that we wanted to sort of address before we jump into the Q&A as well. But we both have a lot of thoughts on this. And so sort of this first question is around, are coding skills enough? And one of the things that I talk about, and I talked about this a little bit in the STEM webinar, and it's very true for computer science students as well, is that there are soft skills that are necessary as well. So things like teamwork. For example, when at MIT, if you go to MIT and do a visit, they actually will talk about they talked about this with the college counselors. I don't know that they'd say this just to a student visit, but they talk about the importance of making sure that you have a study group that you work with when you're there, because no student is going to survive at MIT by trying to do all of their courses on their own. Like, that sense of teamwork is so vital to them, and it's vital in admissions as well. So that's actually something they're really looking for in the applications, is do you understand what it means to be a part of a team, both to contribute and also to learn from as a part of a team. And so that's one example. Another one is, thinking about like the ethics and like self-driving cars. Hansel and I had a whole conversation about that. A self-driving car, how do you code it to make a decision about, it's coming up to a crosswalk, somebody is crossing in front of them, there are people on the sidewalk on this side, there's another car on this side, there's somebody right behind them. How do you code the self-driving car to make that decision about what do they do in that situation when, people's lives are at risk? That is an ethical question. And so in order to code a self-driving vehicle to do that, you have to have a pretty nuanced understanding of ethics and humanity in order to be able to sort of encode some of that into the car. Hansel, what other thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I'm biggest on the soft skills thing. If you were to ask me as a CS major who's coding a lot nowadays, is the answer to this, are coding skills enough? The answer is no. I'm a huge introvert. I've always been, and I was that socially awkward kid. When I got my CS degree, I was. You guys probably all watch Big Bang Theory. I was Sheldon. I was throwdown coding, but I was not good with socializing, right? And that, honestly, that held me back when I got into the real world. The soft skills of being able to work with people, selling, relationships, communicating, all that stuff is just so important in every industry, but even coders. We're not all just a bunch of dorks with hoodies on in the corner. We're all talking to the team, talking to the product manager, and so I think it's just so important to really get those soft skills along with the coding, and not be a Sheldon. You can be a Sheldon, to get all the perfect grades and scores and all that stuff, but it doesn't work when you get into real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that science communication as well. Like, this is something that I've had lots of conversations with students about too. Nothing kills a great idea faster than somebody who can't communicate that idea. And so even if you can code, even if you have the most brilliant idea for an app and you can code the heck out of it, if you can't communicate that idea to somebody else, whether it's trying to, do a pitch competition in order to, get capital so that you can launch your business, or in order to, get somebody to, buy into the premise of what you're doing. If if you can't communicate that idea, it almost doesn't matter how good of a coder you are. You need to be able to sort of share that information as well. So
Yeah,
these,
and Meredith, you probably know better than I do, but I suspect that, when you're doing your college applications, they probably look at that. You can't just be this super pointy person that all you do is code and math. You gotta be able to relate. You gotta be able to write. You got to be able to do some of the other soft skill things.
yeah, absolutely. And when you're reading applications, you are trying to build a class. Like that's a term that folks, folks who are, parents, and if you are, juniors, you probably heard that term at this point. Ninth graders, maybe not so much. But in admissions, you're trying to build a class. You're looking both at the individual applicant as you're reviewing the application, but you're also sort of looking at the total group of like, who are we going to be inviting to live on our campus and be our students next year? And so as a class, you're looking for a well-rounded class. And so some of the students who are in there are going to be very pointy. So there will probably be some like super duper, all I do is code and then introvert back in my dorm room later on. Not a ton of them, because colleges are also looking for students who want to be engaged with the campus. They want to be a part of the campus life. They don't just want to go and hide out in their room afterwards. They are looking for people who have at least some well-roundedness. And some people would describe it as sort of being shaped like a T, where you've got like some area that's really deep, but then you've got more breadth as well. That's another sort of way to think about it. And it is true. Like we need to make sure that you have sort of, a totality of experience and skills, and the potential for those as you're arriving in college, because you're going to need to work on those when you're in college in order to be the most successful that you can be over time. Yeah. Well, I want to move on then to the next question. And Ansel, I'm going to let you start with this. We've had a lot of conversations about whether or not CS majors are still going to be a thing, particularly in the face of AI.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, our parents, I am in the business of teaching kids to code, and a lot of the parents ask us, do we still need coders? Do my kids still need the code since AI is going to just replace everything? Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of NVIDIA, a very famous AI oriented company, he recently said that he doesn't think kids need to code because you can just use AI. Now he's pretty biased because that's what his company does. And as much as I respect the guy, I think the exact opposite. I think 100% kids absolutely need the code. And the reason is there's so many reasons that it would take too long for me to go into. But the way I see AI is it is a productivity tool. Similar to when humans invented the car, when we invented the plane, when the internet came about. It wasn't that once the internet came about, well, then we didn't need to go see anybody in person. We could just order everything from Amazon. In the end, we still have our social things, and we use the internet to make us a lot more productive to do everything else. And I see AI the same way. The AI can help those who are basic coders, let's say our entry-level coders. They can help them code that code very quickly, true, to the point where they might not have that much work to do. But what I think will happen is instead of that person getting laid off, I think that person will instead just do more things using AI and just simply be more productive. Just like the calculator doesn't mean that you no longer have to know math. AI will help us to code, but code a lot faster. But somebody will still need to know how to code, especially AI itself. That's another argument. AI itself, like who's going to manage the AI itself? Well, it's got to be coders. So I still think there will be a need for a lot of coders in the future. That's my take, Meredith. What do you think from your side?
So I tend to agree with you that there is still a need to learn to code. There is still a need for computer science majors. One of the things that I have found interesting over the past couple of years in particular. So I've been doing this for a while at this point. I think people have figured that out. When I was at Purdue University, I was the recruiter for the College of Science, which includes their computer science major. After the dot-com bust. So this was like 2003. So this was 21 years ago. And I can remember families, there were pieces in the New York Times about the death of computer science and how there weren't any jobs and all of this stuff. And there were families who literally asked in information sessions, when I was, presenting, they were visiting on campus, families who literally asked, why should I send my student to school to study computer science when there aren't any jobs anymore? There aren't any jobs here in the US. There are some that are being offshored, but there aren't any good computer science jobs anymore. They don't exist. The dot-com bust, it's over. And so there have been echoes of that now in the last year or so, because there have been layoffs in the tech industry. There have been a not insignificant number of layoffs over the last, 18 months or so. And so I'm starting to see some signs that there's a little bit of a boom and bust to computer science as an industry. And I don't think it's going to be total bust. I don't think it's ever going to go away, but definitely sort of like boom and lull maybe. So, a little bit of that, like some softness in the hiring. But to me, like what Hansel was saying, that it goes back to the first point about our coding skills enough. I think the people who are going to be in the best position to be hired and to continue to work are the people who will have coding skills and people who are not just coders, people who understand that, there are other elements that are necessary. It's not just about, can you bang out some programming? It's about, do you understand how to develop and design software? Do you understand how to use code and content and service to solving problems in other areas as well? Like ultimately, I think those are the people who are going to be best served as people who develop this entire skill set, not just the can you, speak 5 programming languages, for lack of a better term. So I think that in some ways takes us to our final question here. And then we will still have time for Q&A. We're trying to allow time for Q&A. I can see that there are some questions coming into the Q&A box here. Is CS your thing, and should it be? We had a really interesting conversation about this as well. And the short answer is we can't really answer that question for you. Ultimately, you are the only one, you as a student are the only one who can really decide whether or not it's your thing. One thing that I find that students and families don't always remember, or may not be aware of, is that your major is not automatically your career. It is not necessarily a one-to-one direct connection between the two of them. So if you major in computer science, that doesn't mean your career automatically is computer science. If you major in something other than computer science, that does not mean you cannot work in computer science. That doesn't mean you can't be a software developer, a software designer. We spend a lot of time looking at like post-grad numbers and like data from the colleges about like, where do our graduates go? And like, what are their first job titles and stuff? That's information that's out there and available. I teach my college-wise students to find that. But looking at that, do you have to major in computer science to get a job in software? No. Are most of the people who work in software computer science majors? Sure. But do you have to? No. And so there are a lot of sort of different ways to frame that. And again, thinking, do you want to study just the computer science, or do you want to use computer science and service to something else? Ansel, I don't know what else you.
Yeah, I think the reason why Meredith and I like this question as the last question is to urge you to just stop and pause for a second. I'm certainly not saying don't do CS, but pause for a second. My background is I've been a coder for life. I was 6th grade. I started coding, and that was my superpower. That is what I do better than most people, and I always thought computer science. But if you were to ask me now, 30 years later, after I've gotten my degree, 30 years later. Should that have been my my major? I'm actually not sure. You actually got me thinking about that, Meredith. I was like, what if I had another major? Maybe CS is my minor instead. Or if I was just a business major and did something else, you know what? Coding is such my natural thing. I bet you I would still be doing the same thing I'm doing now, even if I would have gotten a business major or a finance major, because that's just what I gravitate towards.
Yeah.
So we're not saying, obviously we're not trying to answer this question for you folks, but we are trying to say, hey, please ask it to yourself and see if it does make sense for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially given sort of that early comment about like choosing the right fit major for you really helps you optimize your chances of getting into a college that's a great fit for you. Working on and thinking through and answering this question as best you can for yourself. And if you're not sure if CS is your thing, then there are plenty of places where you can major in CS and don't have to commit to it during the application. So the places where it's, the direct admit to the major, there are plenty of places that you can do that you can still sort of explore before committing to computer science. So, and with that, I'm going to invite Belinda to join us again for just a few minutes, and then she's gonna take care of a couple of other little things, and then we'll do some Q&A.
Yay! Wow, thank you for such an interesting presentation, Meredith and Hansel. Always love hearing you speak. So during the presentation, I've had quite a few people asking me how they can find out more about working with a college counsellor as awesome as Meredith. So before we get into the Q&A, I did just want to share a little bit more information about how you can take that next step and work with CollegeWise if it's something that you are interested in. So I'm about to launch another poll now. And this one is going to ask you if you're interested in working with CollegeWise. So let me launch that now. So you have the option here to say, nope, I just want to take advantage of your free resources. We produce a whole load of free resources at CollegeWise to support people with their college journey. That includes ebooks, it includes events like what we're hosting today. So that's absolutely fine. But if you are looking to get started with a CollegeWise counsellor, especially if you're looking to get started quite soon, perhaps you're a junior or maybe even about to be a senior, then we do recommend that you get in touch with us as soon as possible so we can make sure that you can get yourself a counsellor that's a great match for you. So basically at CollegeWise, for those of you that missed at the beginning, we work one-to-one with students. We can take them through their entire middle and high school journey, supporting with everything from selecting the right classes, extracurriculars, essays, deciding whether a STEM major, a computer science major is the right thing for you, all the way through to submitting a really awesome application. And we have counsellors like Meredith, 85 plus of them actually, who are available to support students with all of those aspects of the journey. So thank you so much for finishing the poll. I did also want to say, for those people who are joining us after this event is over, we will be sharing out the recording. I know some people will be seeing it that way. So for you who are watching the recording, if you are interested in finding out more about working with CollegeWise, you can scan this QR code, and that will give you the opportunity to schedule a meeting with one of our program advisors. The other final thing I want to say is that spaces are filling up quite quickly. So if you already know right now that you are interested in getting started with a counsellor and you want to do more than just find out more, then I am going to drop a fast track link into the chat. This will enable you to get straight on the calendar rather than waiting for somebody to contact you. You can get that appointment booked in straight away. I know lots of our counsellors are already full up. I'm not sure for Meredith, but she always fills up very quickly. So yes, I will drop that link for you right now. All right, wonderful. I've got out my little spiel there. And we do have some time left over for the Q&A. So Meredith and Hansel, we've had quite a few great questions come through actually. So the first question that I wanted to ask you all that we got was, okay, how many APs do you think are needed for a computer science major? And this person is asking specifically for the UCs, but it might be helpful just to answer that question in more general terms as well for everybody else.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you the most accurate and most hated response. It depends. And the reason I say it depends is because there's no one universal answer. That it depends is the most frustrating answer in college admissions, and it is the most accurate one. The reason I'm saying that is because it depends on the context of your high school. It depends on what you have access to at your school. There are some schools that put a limit on the number of APs that you can take. You're only allowed to take one AP in 10th grade. You're only allowed to take one AP in 11th, and then maybe only 3 in your senior year. There are other places that say you want to take an AP as a 9th grader, go for it. Go for it. Have some fun. And, by the time they graduate, they can have 10, 11, 12 APs. Colleges are considering you within the context of what you have access to at your school, and then what you've chosen to do with your time with those resources, and if you've chosen to look outside of school a little bit. There are some schools that allow students to self-study and take AP exams on their own. Not every school permits that. There are some that actually distinctly discourage that. There's some that absolutely have rules that will not permit that at all. So there's no absolute answer to that. What I will say is that lean into the most demanding curriculum available to you based on whatever your trajectory is. So, making sure that if you have to prioritize APs, prioritize the AP maths and the AP sciences. And then, beyond that, lean into your other areas of strength, depending on the areas that you're interested in. So if you don't already hate that it depends response, by the way, you will absolutely hate that response by the time you are done with your journey to college, because it's true, but it's so frustrating for families. And I know it is. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to that question, somebody else was asking, what APs would be good APs to take?
So again, I would say it depends, but leaning into the math and the science for the most part are going to be smart. So the math, the physical science, the computer science, and then if you know what area you're interested in using computer science related to, leaning into APs in that area. If you don't, lean into your curiosity and take APs in those areas. If possible, if you are aiming for the most competitive schools, the most highly selective, the most highly rejective colleges, you want to try to sort of take the most demanding curriculum across your entire spectrum of courses. So even if you don't love AP English, you want to seriously consider taking AP English if you're applying to, the Stanfords and the Carnegie Mellons, the MITs of the world.
Thank you. Okay, so someone else is asking, do you recommend computer science?
Sorry, you broke up just a little bit. Can you say that again?
Do you recommend the edX courses for computer science? That wasn't one of the ones that was listed on your slide.
I'm curious about Hansel's opinion about them.
I don't have an opinion of edX. I haven't really done much research on them. So I'm afraid I don't have an answer.
All right. So I would say, I think if it fits with your schedule and it's an area that you're interested in, that's another way to sort of, engage your curiosity and demonstrate that you're, doing things outside of the classroom. So I would consider it to be relatively parallel with Coursera. It's not exactly parallel, but I would consider it to be relatively parallel with Coursera from my perspective.
Awesome. Okay, so somebody else is asking, is saying that they're almost done with high school. Is there still a chance for them to learn some skills that they need to be able to get into a computer science program?
Yeah. I mean, this is somebody who is getting ready to, they're still applying, or this was probably an 11th grade. I didn't see that there were any 12th graders on. So absolutely. And I think for that student, probably what I would say from an admissions perspective is to look at colleges where it's not going to be a direct admit to computer science, because that's somebody who may not be super competitive for a University of Washington or a Carnegie Mellon, where a lot of people are going to have a ton of computer science experiential practice already. But there are plenty of places where you don't have to commit to a computer science major right away. We didn't really talk about those a whole lot today, but I would recommend sort of trying to more emphasize those kinds of opportunities instead. And then Hansel, what would you say would be like the quickest experience? What would you say for somebody who's trying to ramp up fast at this stage? What would you recommend experientially?
Yeah, I hate to say it. It also depends. In the end, if I had to choose something, it's just code like the wind. Just go out there and figure out something that you want to do and set aside a lot of time because it takes a lot of time, and just practice, and just keep doing it until you figure out how to code the basics, and then figure out how to code something that you enjoy. If you're out of time, it's hard, but I think the key is to use some time management and just say, every day I'm going to spend 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever you can afford, and just throw down. To me, that's all coding is. You just have to practice it. You have to commit to yourself and practice it.
Well, unfortunately, everybody, we are out of time, and we had so many more questions from you all. So thank you for being such an engaged audience tonight. I was also loving seeing the chat throughout. So much engagement, so much passion in this room. So thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks so much again to Meredith and to Hansel for providing such awesome information. We hope to have the opportunity for you to join us again for another webinar in the future. Have a really fantastic evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for
Thanks,
being
Belinda.
here.
Thanks, Meredith.